Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today, my guest is Michelle Curiel of the Sobriety Playbook. And so, as anybody that has been a listener of the show knows, I do mine is Recovery Roadmap. I have a coaching program that's based off that. So today is the Sobriety Playbook meets the Recovery Roadmap. Michelle, how are you today?
I'm doing really well, Matt. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm grateful to be
Thank
here.
you. Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. And it's, we were talking a little bit before we got started, and we're catching it at a really cool time in your life. And I'd love for you to elaborate on that. Just the last couple of weeks, by the sounds, have been quite a whirlwind for you. So please tell us about it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for inquiring. So I would say about a week and a half ago, I started to really come into some unexpected financial abundance. I have been getting some very generous donations from some of my subscribers on YouTube and followers on Instagram, simply expressing their gratitude through an energetic exchange. And so I had received some unexpected deposits into my checking account that have allowed me to leave corporate America, leave the workforce, all of that. And so I'm feeling extremely grateful today for the opportunity to focus my time and energy on what it is that I'm passionate about, and focus all of that time on it rather than trying to make time throughout my week to fit in podcasts and collaborations and writing scripts and all those things. So
Yeah. Congratulations. First off, that's amazing. And I'm sure,
thank you.
grateful is it's barely scratches the surface in some respects for like the what you're feeling right
Yeah,
now, right? Which is amazing.
right.
So shout out to your followers, subscribers, fans, just however you want to address them. That's amazing. Amazing story. So much to unpack there. I want to get into, like, you had mentioned, and it was really resonating with me, how you were feeling towards the end of your tenure in corporate America, as you call it, and very much related to how, my exit of my previous career, to the way that you were describing your energy. I want to get into that. Before I do, though, you're saying you have more time to be acting on your passion. Tell us about your passion. I'd love to hear more about it. What are
Yeah.
you passionate about? Where are you going to be placing your energy now?
Yeah, so I'm really passionate about recovery, sobriety, consciousness, energy work. I was in active alcoholism and drug addiction for 25 years. So from the time that I was 14 until I was 39 years old, I was addicted to some type of substance. I was always gravitating towards something outside of myself to feel happy. Well, in 2019, right before we went into isolation or the pandemic, whatever it is that you want to call it, I had chosen to get sober. And so I'm really grateful for that time, because we were told we couldn't go outside, right? So I chose to go within myself, and I found everything that I have always been seeking within myself. Nothing existed outside of myself that could make me happy. So today, I'm extremely passionate about sharing my journey, sharing the realizations that I have encountered throughout that time in a cocoon phase, if you will. And I just like to share like my experience and all of the strength that I have attained. I have literally learned to transform all of the suffering and pain and sorrow and doubt into peace and liberation and joy. So I feel like I am here to kind of show people the way out of that perceived like addiction, and show them that there's a way from like darkness into the light.
I love that. I find this, especially in the recovery field, but just us as humans, I think there's this need to, after we've gone through something, it's like that hero's journey where we get to the other side.
Yes.
There's this like need to go back and share it with other people, be like, no,
Yes.
there is, I've done it. I know the way, right? So I'm hearing that from you, which is so cool. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. We actually have pretty similar like sober birthdays. I remember we were looking too, like yours is so it's 8/8. So yeah, August 8th then, right? Yeah,
Right.
very cool. Okay, that's awesome. That's right around my birthday too, August 12th. Just, I don't know why I'm gonna say that. Just, I saw August. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
so beautiful thing. Let's get into the energetic side of, and I love talking about this type of stuff. So you were mentioning, leaving or before you'd left the job, there was, kind of this like fragmented energy about you, and yeah, just like
Oh my
elaborate on it.
goodness.
You said it a lot more, a lot better than I can. So, but
Yeah, yeah.
I'd love to get into that though.
I love the way that you put it though, like fragmented energy. Um, and I definitely feel too, I've gone through this hero's journey. And for me, what I've realized is like, okay, if I've come out the other side and I've had all these realizations, I've been able to transmute all of this energy. If I just move forward in my life without going back and saying like, hey guys, look, this is what I found out. This is my experience. This is what I went through. And this is what worked for me. I feel like that's a place of being very, very selfish. And
Mm,
so going back to your question in regards to working in corporate America and having these fragmented part of myself, like just this past week, I had sent you a DM and I said, you know what, I'm going to be off of Instagram for about a week. And one of the reasons why is because I was literally setting the intention to call back all of the fragmented energy that I had put out into the world.
mm,
And I feel like in the job that I was doing, I was constantly having to put on a mask,
mhm.
be somebody that I wasn't. It was kind of like being the face of a corporation. And being in a place like that is physically exhausting because I'm not being true to myself.
Mm,
But in order for the company to, be successful and for me to do my job, I kind of had to subconsciously come into agreement with being this character. And
mhm.
I'm just so grateful now that I can be who I truly am and not have to wear a mask. I can go through the spectrum of emotions throughout my day. I can be on my channel and be my true self. But in order to get to the place where I was able to get this abundance, like I need to go through this myriad of like emotions and energetic spectrum and being a part of the world. And as some of the people in the 12-step community says, it's like you're packing into the stream of life.
Mm.
So I am just learning to call back all of my energy, emotionally detox, and be in gratitude for everything that I learned on that part of my journey.
Yeah, very cool. So, and I had a moment a little over a year ago where I removed myself from my, the corporate job, if you will. And I really wish I had taken that week. I mean, I took a weekend and I found myself to uh, start going a little bit into panic mode because it was like, man,
Mm.
I don't know really what's next. So my
Uh-huh.
default mode is to base myself on achieving and like setting plans and crossing out like to-do lists and so forth. So I didn't give myself that, or my pattern of achiever definitely like got turned way up, and there was a panic. And looking back on it, I really wish I'd taken at least a week to myself to do exactly what you had mentioned. There was definitely a fear in myself as far as like what was going to happen next. So I just got back to work, you know what I mean? I took that same like somewhat distracted, fragmented, yet let's do this grinder work ethic into my, my entrepreneur. And
Oh my gosh,
it
yes.
served me well for the beginning of it. And now I'm finding that it's like, okay, I'm kind of getting in my own way now. So
Yeah,
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 I admire you for doing that.
yeah. I really have an understanding of what you mean by thinking about taking that grinder work ethic
Yeah.
into your passion. But I realize, you know what? There is so much toxicity in that grinding tech, like
Yeah,
uh it's just
there
something that
sure
is
is.
going around on social media, like
Yeah,
grind.
totally.
And it's like, you know what grind means? It's like grinding something into powder. Like,
Yeah,
why would I want to grind myself into powder?
totally.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
So it's just
yeah.
like coming into realization that, you know what, that worked for me in that part
Hmm.
of my life,
Yeah.
but this is going to be something completely new for me. So just start fresh.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Well, let's go back in time. We're talking about like where you are now. I really want to get into your story. Like, and the floor is yours. Take it back as far as you care to go, as far as, getting into the different addictions that you'd had. I noticed that you did like an air quote of like perceived addictions. I definitely want to
Yeah,
get back to that. It's a very
cool.
cool. Yeah, I like that. I definitely want to get into that. But yeah, the floor is yours. I'd love to hear more about you and just like, yeah, however far back you care to go.
Sure. So I guess we could all start at the age of 14, or let's back it up just a little bit further, okay?
Yeah.
So I was born in San Antonio, Texas. I'm the eldest of three, so it's me, and then I have two younger brothers. My parents are still married. My dad, as a child, was a geologist and a teacher.
Cool.
He made enough money to where my mother did not have to go to work, so she was very grateful that she could stay home and take care of me and my brothers. From the time that I was 3 years old up until high school, I was going to Catholic private school. There was a lot of things that occurred in school that always kind of just didn't feel right, like within myself. Growing up, I always felt very energetically sensitive to other people. So for example, if I walked into a room, I could feel the energy. If I walked into someone's house or something, I could tell like if someone had just passed away. If there was an argument, I knew something was off. I was just very, very sensitive. And the thing is that the schools that I went to and the adults that I hung around kind of pushed this idea onto me that you don't speak about, you're kind of like, you can be seen, but don't be heard.
Yeah.
Everything was kind of like kept within, because if you spoke up, you got punished, right? Like when I went to private school back then, it's like at the beginning of the day, a bell would go off and the principal would call in the intercom and list a name of kids that she needed to go to the front office, and they would stand in line and get paddled. So, wow. I mean, it was like, what did they call that? Corporeal punishment?
Yeah,
something like that?
Corporal punishment. Yeah.
Corporal punishment.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a thing back in the 80s.
Man.
So I was like in kindergarten in 1985. It was back then whenever we would have like bomb raid alarms that would go off. You have to be under the little wooden desk with your head under there like that.
Different
so
time.
It was a different time.
Yeah.
So fast forward, I'm 14 years old. I think I'm in 8th grade. I had been in private school my whole life. I was always an athlete, and I was like straight A's, all this stuff, but I just honestly got tired of not getting recognized or getting any attention for being this like quote unquote good girl. So I was like, okay, no one loves me for all these amazing things that I'm doing. Maybe like if I start doing these negative things and I shift, then I'll start getting attention. Guys are going to want to date me. I'll have a boyfriend. Like I really craved attention. My parents loved me and everything like that, but that only took me so far. So at that age, I started to date someone that was a drug dealer. I started to smoke marijuana for the first time. So the summer before high school, I got high in my parents' house. I did not realize that smoke was going to completely like envelop the whole entire house. And as soon as my mom and dad walked in, like it would be hot boxed. I didn't know that was going to occur. So I got grounded for like a year. And what my teenager mind said to myself was, you know what, you can't smoke weed anymore because your family's going to smell it. So do something that they can't smell. So I got into high school as a freshman and I started to do cocaine. Can't smell cocaine or anything. So I started to do that. Started to drink in high school, graduated high school, went to Los Angeles to become a model, to be an actor, did all these things. Came back to San Antonio after being there for about 1.5 years. And then again, I started to date somebody that was a drug dealer, started doing crack cocaine, did that for about 7 years, and then broke up with that guy, and then found someone else and started to snort heroin for 7 years. After that, I started to shoot up, and that's when like everything really, really started to go downhill for me.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So did like these stints of doing, yeah, you can see this progression, right? And
Hmm.
it's like, and yeah, it's an interesting story, like you mentioned, how it all started from this like this craving for some kind of external stimulus that you weren't getting from doing this, acting a certain way. So you're like, well, if
Hmm.
this isn't going to work, I'm going to find it one way or another. And
Hmm.
what that really set off for you. And then it set off this whole, you know, chain of events into what you've mentioned. So when you're in that stage there, when you're at those final stages of like your drug use and such, what happened to you, that what intervened? Was it like
Hmm.
something that happened inside you? Was it like a spiritual intervention? Was it family? What happened that you were able to pull yourself out of that?
Well, my family loved me so, so much, always loved me. But in the end, like, so in the end, I was 300 pounds. I was suffering from like pulmonary embolisms, pancreatitis, like over and over. My skin was gray. I was temporarily in a wheelchair. I could barely breathe because I used to smoke crack for like 7 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had almost lost my left arm to an abscess because I was constantly shooting up with dirty needles.
Man.
And I overdosed. I flatlined one time off something that it was fentanyl, but I thought that it was heroin. Um, I overdosed probably, from what I can count, like maybe 7 times, because that's whenever fentanyl just started to become like a big
Yeah.
issue.
Wow.
Um, and so in the end, like, I was, my parents didn't want me to stay at their house anymore. Like, they loved me, but they didn't want me to stay at their house
Yeah.
because I was stealing from them, pawning their things. I was having drug dealers drop off drugs at the house.
Mm-hmm.
I was shooting up in their house, flatlining on their in their bathroom on Easter morning. And so that day, they said, whenever I got revived from the paramedics and I woke up, I
Mm-hmm.
looked around, and my parents, I'd never seen them so distraught. They had to kick down the bathroom door to get to me. And I looked at the paramedics and I said, "What the fuck am I doing here? Get me out of here." And so they took me into the hospital, into a psych ward. And it was absolutely terrifying because I was there for like 24 days or something like that. And it
Wow.
had gotten to a point where I didn't even know if they were going to let me out. And I thought that I was going to be stuck there for the rest of my life. And it was so scary because
Mm.
people were literally like in wheelchairs, strapped down with their arms, strapped down with their head to the back of the wheelchairs, people
Yeah.
screaming at
Yeah.
night. And with so many different mental issues that were occurring. And so it was truly a blessing in disguise in that moment when I called my parents from the psych ward and said, "Okay, well, they're about to let me out." And they said, "Well, you can't come back here."
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah. Okay.
"What do you mean I can't come back
Yeah.
home?" And so
Right.
that's whenever I needed to make the decision to actually try to live my life, because I realized, like, there's been several suicide attempts. Every time I would wake up and I'd be cursing at God and be like, "Why the hell am I still here? Like, I'm
Mm.
trying to die. That's all that I want to do is die.
Yeah.
Like, why am I here?"
Yeah.
And so I made a decision that I was going to try to live my life. And so at that point, like, I had run out of my health insurance and I had to start looking into going to state funded facilities. And
Wow.
that was so uncomfortable, Matt.
Yeah.
So
Right.
uncomfortable.
My goodness. There's a
Mhm.
few things that come up. The first thing that jumps out to me. So you've had these like the 7 overdoses, flatline. Have you had like what could be described as a near death experience? Like, did you have like
Mm.
a meeting with like your relatives on the other side, so to speak? Did you remember anything like that? I'm just very curious.
So no, so whenever I flatlined, I was just sharing this on another podcast the other day. I said, you know what? I said, I don't, you know how people always talk about going to the light?
Yes.
I remember just being in complete darkness, so
Wow.
scared and feeling so alone.
Hmm.
Um, and that's all that I remember. But I did come back with what I call 3 spirit guides
Mm.
that have helped guide me,
Yeah. Yeah.
throughout the sobriety journey,
Yeah.
like flatlining. in a sense, activated some spiritual gifts that were dormant
Yeah.
until
Okay.
39 years old. So
Mm,
now I have the ability to, I have this clear hearing, clear audience.
mm,
My spirit guides speak to me telepathically.
mhm.
And sometimes, like, I'll give you an example. When I was living in Austin and I didn't have a vehicle, I would have to take the bus, and I'd be walking down the street, downtown Austin, Texas. And then they would say, get on this bus. And I was like, talking to them,
Yeah.
telepathically, like, why should I get on this bus? It doesn't make sense. That one's not going to take me to South Austin,
Yeah.
and they said, just get on the bus. And so
Yeah.
I just get on the bus and it takes me exactly where I need to go. It's like,
Mm,
or if I'm driving down the highway, they'll say, take this exit. And so I'll just take the exit. And then
wow.
I'll find out that there was like this horrible accident on I-10. And if I would have gone that direction, I would have been in traffic forever and I wouldn't have gotten to my appointment on time, or things
Wow.
like that. Like,
Yeah. Super cool.
yeah, yeah.
I love hearing about this kind of stuff. So, and is there like a distinction between the voices that you hear? Like, so you have these three guides. Do they show up in, like, you know what I mean, in a different spot? Like one will be sort of, positioned spatially over on the right hand. You know what I mean? Is there anything like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that just there's a distinction between the three, or?
You know what? I have not noticed a distinction between their voices, but I know that there are three of them.
Mm,
I have just recently become consciously aware, I guess, at the beginning of this year, that they were actually there. And I've actually had other healers or intuitives that are my friends confirm that there's actually three. When
yeah.
at first, I just thought that I was just making this up.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating. It's
Mhm.
fascinating. I love it. Cool. So you're basically at a stage here. Your parents are saying you can't come home. It's like this very, palatable shift. Or I forget the word. Palpable. There we go. Thank you. Shift where there's like, okay, I can't go home anymore. There's something
Yeah.
different about this time. So how did you react to that? Because even you recalling the story, it seemed like that was
Mm.
a pretty important part of your life there, like hearing that there's
Yeah.
no going back home right now.
Mhm.
And then from there, what happened from there?
Yeah, it was a pivotal point in my life. It was, I'd say, the catalyst to transformation.
Is it?
Um, I feel like if my parents wouldn't have learned to set that boundary, and it was a firm boundary, that I would probably be dead today.
Wow.
So with
Yeah.
that decision, it allowed me to take personal responsibility for my life. I had to start reaching out to, like I'd said, the state funded facilities, sober living homes that
Yeah.
were like Oxford homes, which that's in itself was a trip. Oh my gosh, I totally haven't thought about these things in so long.
Yeah.
My gosh, the
Sure.
things that I've experienced, I'm so grateful for, because it has really set a firm foundation for my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Excellent. So, we're at the stage now. What was like that early sobriety like for you?
Mm.
I'm interested because, you're getting into the one-on-one coaching. I get this impression that you're very aware and grateful. Like you have a perspective on everything that you've been through. So what was it like? I'm hearing the person I'm speaking to right now is very, very different from the person that you
Mhm.
have painted the picture of how you used to be. So like, how did you
Yeah,
get to this stage? Because this seems like a complete 180.
yeah, it does. And what's really interesting is I kind of feel like in this moment in time, in my state of consciousness right now, I kind of see myself as a soul braid, if you will. I don't know if
Mm,
you've ever heard this, but
no.
I was telling somebody this the other day. I said, I feel like I'm, I still have parts of the false self, the
Mm,
limited mindset,
okay.
the one that kind of still has the self-doubt,
Mm,
the
mhm.
shadow aspects of me that I have not transmuted yet. And then
Yeah.
there's the higher self, right?
Mhm.
So there's like the old Michelle, and then there's the higher self. And there's
Yes.
more of the higher self than the false self, the lower nature,
Yes. Yeah.
that functions from like the lower chakras of like fear and doubt and
Yeah.
shame and insecurity
Mhm.
and ungroundedness. But it's like a 25-75 split. But
Gotcha.
at the same time, they're like this. They're
Wow.
still
Interesting.
intertwined with each other.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So right now, like sometimes I will interface with beings that are from my perceived past, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because all we truly have is the now. So, but most people will say like from the past, right? From my old life, if you will. And then they come and they see me and they're like, I don't know this person.
Right.
And honestly, Matt, like my memory does not start until I got sober. So anything that occurred in the past, like I have bits and pieces that have come into the forefront of my mind. But for the most part, like if someone comes to me from the days where I was in active alcoholism and addiction, like I have no idea who you are.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I'm curious as far as, because like, you know, I've heard, and from my own personal, you know, journey, there's definitely the aspect of like the body keeps score. You know what I mean? So there's like these
I have
things
that
that
book.
you have that book. Okay, very cool. Yes,
It.
yeah, very cool. So there's this idea, right? Like as I'm going through and allowing some of this stuff to finally surface, these emotions that I've spent years suppressing or just kind of trapping here. You know, I'm finding that the sensations in my body are similar to things that I've experienced in the past. The embarrassment comes back, I get flushed in the face, and I'm allowing that now. So is there anything like that? I understand like the memories aspect of it, but how about is there ever sensations in your body that show up, energy that you're just kind of like, what is this? And you're assuming that it's perhaps attached to these memories that you've long since forgotten, these people. Do you get what I mean?
I do get what you mean. And I'm really grateful that you're bringing that up because I've been experiencing this a lot lately. I feel like I finally got to a place of acceptance about some of the things that I've allowed to occur in my life. And I feel safe enough in my being, like I'm starting to become more embodied with who I am, that there's been things that I have suppressed so deep that are starting to come up for me that I didn't have the ability to look at before or wasn't even willing to look at. And so like I have been experiencing like what is considered anxiety and sometimes states of depression because I am looking at parts of myself that I'm not necessarily okay with in a sense. Like there's things that I'm remembering that I have done in the past that I'm surprised to actually start to feel shame about because working in the 12-step program at the very beginning of my sobriety, I let go of a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. And I realized that that's not who I truly was. So I was able to let it go. But lately, it's like there's so much stuff that has been coming up for me to truly look at. And it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
really uncomfortable.
Right. Okay. Yes. Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of people that just will hear that. And that's going to be permission for them to be uncomfortable as well. Right. So there's this need to, especially in people that have had histories with the alcohol, drug use, don't want to be uncomfortable. You know what I mean? It's like that we've spent years. I'm so well practiced at not being uncomfortable, right? I'll find anything at all not to feel that feeling again, you know? So I love how you just said that. And then I think that's, you know, permission for a lot of people to, you're this far into your journey and you're still feeling that way. And it's, you know what, that's okay. That's okay. Right. Sorry, did you have something to?
Yeah. If you don't mind me just adding
of
one
course,
thing.
Please do.
So you're asking me what it was like at the very beginning of my sobriety. So it was really uncomfortable. I did not know how to be responsible in a sense of like arrested development. So if I started doing drugs at the age of 14, I felt like I was literally a teenager at the age of 39, going into the world. I was in a city that I had never lived in. I was in Austin. So I went to rehab there. And one of the requirements of living in the sober living home was that I needed to get a 9-to-5 job. And I really didn't want to do that because prior to that, I was used to just basically getting everything that I wanted by dating like a guy, to be honest, or by stealing things that I wanted from the store. And I realized like I needed to be honest, and that was really uncomfortable for me. I had started to go to a 12-step program that I'm super grateful for because it was the foundation of my sobriety. It taught me how to be honest, open-minded, willing, take a look at my past, learn the root cause of my resentments and fears, and emotionally detox and spiritually detox. And then it taught me how to be of service to other people, because prior to getting sober, I was in service to self. And then I realized that wasn't beneficial to me, that wasn't beneficial to the world, and that I needed to learn to shift from service to self to service to others. And that is whenever a lot of transformation truly started to begin, because I realized that I was you and you are me. But if I don't treat you with love and kindness and open-mindedness and non-judgment, then I am basically not treating myself with love and kindness and non-judgment. So I just learned how to really interface with like the world and have a job and have sponsees and have communication with my sponsor, and allowed people to love me. So it was kind of like beginning and being reborn in a sense. And I felt like when I got sober, it was kind of like putting on a new set of glasses, in a sense that I was able to see the birds and I was able to see the sky and I was able to feel the air. But at the same time, like my skin was hurting me and everything was painful. And I felt like I was getting energetically bombarded by everything that I had shut off. Because one of the reasons why I had ran into the arms of drugs and alcohol was because as soon as I had gotten high, it kind of just shut off my spiritual gift. So it went from on to off. So I could no longer like hear earthbound spirits, or I wasn't telepathic anymore. I didn't feel the energy in room, and I kind of felt like I had this shield around me. So once I got sober,
interesting. Yeah.
All of that went away.
Yeah.
And I was feeling everything.
Yeah. Like you say,
like, oh
bombarded. Yeah. All your
Yes.
senses just bombarded and just, taking on other folks' energy. I want to get into that too. I imagine that there is a degree of that you've had to navigate, as far as, and especially when you're in the line of work that you're doing, this one-on-one coaching, it could be very easy for you to take on others' energy, right? So how have you cultivated this ability to stay grounded in your own and still have like an empathetic experience with somebody without taking too much energy on to the detriment of yourself?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And one of the things that I really had to implement in my life is a daily routine. So for me, like before I even go out into the world, there's like a series of things that I do every single day so that I get myself grounded and into my body and shielded in a sense, so that I don't go out into the world and I'm not like a sponge.
Right.
So one of the first things that I do as soon as I wake up and I realize that I'm alive and before I even open my eyes, is I just go straight into gratitude. Gratitude has been such a transformative place to be in my life. It's one thing that I have learned, is that if I'm grateful, I can't be depressed. I can't be grateful in any other emotion. So going straight into gratitude for being alive, speaking to my higher power about all of the things that I'm grateful for. And then I start to do everything with like mindfulness and awareness. I won't turn on my phone for the first 2 hours of the day because I feel like I go into like fight or flight mode. And it's kind of like just answering DMs, answering emails, answering texts. If I do what I had always done, which is roll over, look at my phone and see all these things that people need or whatever, then I start to get frustrated, agitated, and I feel like I'm getting pulled in all these different directions, but it's all my responsibility. It's something that I chose to do. So I make a conscious decision to rise in the morning before I even do any of that stuff, get grounded, do some qigong, work with the prana and the energy and the life force within me, put a protective shield around me, speak to my jewelry, like things like this for protection. It kind of works as like an amulet for me to, and what it does is I set the intention for this to transmute any type of negative energy that is projected towards me, and it protects me from that, rather than me having to transmute that energy myself. Because if I have to do that, then I come home after being in the world exhausted and drained, because I am taking on the energy of the outside world.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I was about to ask, and I'm glad you mentioned it. Morning routines are so important, I find, especially for folks that are in recovery, because I don't know how it was for you, but mornings were either non-existent or I would like wake up hungry. Like I hated mornings as well.
Yeah.
And now I've like, it's my absolute favorite time of day. And that's been a huge shift for myself. And I always like the folks that I work with or, that I'm friends with that are in recovery are almost unanimously the same thing. It's just like the morning is the shit now, you know what I mean? And everybody's got their like rituals or routines, you know what I mean? So yeah, I'm really glad you shared that. Thanks. That's so cool. I'd like to get back into like, you were mentioning it's a really cool, the braid, whatever it's called. It was like a
soul braid.
Soul braid. Okay. I gotta write this down. So cool.
Yeah.
And you're perceiving yourself to be about like 75% of your higher self, 25% of the like this shadow work still to do, the lower self, the lower chakra stuff, the fears, the self-doubts. When that stuff does come up, that 25%, how do you, I guess, what is different about the way that you act or react or respond to that energy now than perhaps the old you would have done, or the previous version of you?
Yeah. So the previous version of me would have definitely gotten high or drunk. I had like a series of avoidance tactics that I would always do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was always like buy things, steal things,
Yeah.
eat something, drink something that's going to make me feel better.
Yeah.
Just anything to focus my attention on the outside. Now, what that looks like for me, and I'm super grateful because I've recently met a group of like-minded individuals that live here in San Antonio that are healers and intuitives and empaths and just very much devoted on their spiritual journey to helping others and being of service. And so for me, like yesterday, something unexpected had come up for me, and I was starting to actually feel like a panic attack come up, which I have not, to be honest, experienced in a really long time. And so rather than keeping it to myself, I went straight to the healing center and did some breath work with some of my friends.
Yeah.
Breath work to me, that's a key that a lot of people don't realize to healing. It allows me to come back into my body. It allows me to come back into the moment. And it allows the stagnant energy that is trapped in different parts of my body to come up to be expressed. And so the challenge with that for me is when those emotions do arise is to allow myself to feel. I still find that it's a little difficult for me to cry and to trust people that are in my presence to do so. So I'm practicing being around these new friends and being who I truly am and allowing myself to be wherever I'm at rather than putting on a mask. So one of the things I realized, and I went to a non-12-step recovery meeting yesterday, was the kind of like, so at the pandemic, we pretty much were alone for a couple of years, right? I realized that it was challenging for me to be around people and to trust people because I was able to trust myself being by myself all the time.
Yeah.
But then whenever I started to, I'm just starting to, like, as of this year, Matt, like go into the world and be around others, that it's hard for me to even, like, if someone touches me on the shoulder, I go like this.
I know
if
what you mean.
Someone tries to hug me, I move backwards.
Yeah.
If someone like gestures towards me, I move backwards. And it's like, I had not realized that had even affected me until last night, whenever I went to this non-12-step recovery meeting and other people were talking about it. And I just realized it for myself for the first time yesterday. Yeah. So it's kind of like doing those uncomfortable things, going into places, being around people, being myself, and allowing other people to, like, love me.
It's beautiful. It's funny that you mentioned, so you're passing on what you you know, somebody had pointed out to you last night, and you're passing that on to me and potentially whoever's listening to this too. Definitely something I didn't notice, but yeah, absolutely. Like the whole idea of like this like, yeah, like hesitation for contact because it had been so long since it had been that like the norm, so to speak. Right. So yeah, interesting. Yeah. Really interesting.
It's crazy. Cause like for me, like I wasn't particularly worried about getting sick or anything like that.
Right.
It was just, it wasn't about that. It was just that I wasn't used to being around humans.
A little bit like out of practice, almost, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very cool. I want to be respectful of your time. This we're looking at, I've got about 9 minutes left, and I want to have a few minutes with you after we end the episode, but I want to give you an opportunity. Like, you know, as we've mentioned, you have this like, you know, this energetic, you know, coming of age, so to speak, for yourself. And now it's like wide open for like what you're going to do with you and your passion. Tell us a little bit about what you're working on. I'd love to know what's coming up for you in the not so distant future. Yeah, you know, if you got like a 2-year, 5-year plan, whatever you want to share. I'm just really interested to see where you're going to go with everything here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to put pen to paper so I can get an actual 5-year plan on paper for me. Because one of the things that I've noticed about manifestation is if I put it on paper and I don't just think it, I actually put it in ink. That is very helpful for manifestation. But for now, what I have been focusing on is I'm really excited because I speak at this one place called Third Eye Healing CBD. It's a kava lounge, and it's a place for people to go get energy readings, go there for recovery, for alternative medicine, Reiki and things like that. But every last Saturday of every month, I go there and I speak about recovery. At the end of this month, I will be speaking about spiritual gifts and how my spiritual gifts came online and how anyone else can access it too. So I'm just going to be sharing my journey with that and my spiritual awakening and everything. I have a YouTube channel, and for the first couple of years, it has just been kind of like a solo journey where it was just me speaking into the camera, sharing my recovery, sharing all of the experiences that I have gone through. But this new phase of my life is going to be about joining other people and inviting them on the podcast to have a conversation with me live. So I'm really excited about that.
Very cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yesterday, I got on Instagram for the first time and had my first guest on there. So we spoke for an hour, and it was really amazing because it was one of my friends that went through a spiritual awakening at the same time that I did.
Oh, super cool.
Yeah. So we were kind of like able to, and it's unfortunate because Instagram only allows for an hour. And we could have honestly been going for hours and hours, but it's okay. You know, we'll get back to it.
That's right. You'll part 2 and 3 still to come, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Very cool.
But,
yeah. And, you know, I'll get you to send over your, you know, any details that you want as far as in the show notes for your YouTube channel and such. I know on Instagram, you're under the handle, the Sobriety Playbook, all one word, lowercase. And you're doing some one-on-one coaching as well. Do you care to talk a little bit about the one-on-one coaching that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So if anyone is interested in one-on-one coaching, they can just DM me on the Sobriety Playbook on Instagram, or just send me a message on the comment section below on YouTube as well. But essentially, I help people navigate their recovery journey. So if anyone is interested in spirituality, the spiritual awakening aspect, their spiritual gifts, being an empath, being a highly sensitive being, if they would like some guidance on narcissistic abuse. The only things that I teach on are things that I have experienced. So I'll give you an example. Like I've been raped, I've been tortured, I've been kidnapped, I've survived narcissistic abuse, I have been through physical and emotional abuse, a bunch of trauma, but I have learned to utilize all of the lessons that I've learned in my life and transmute it into wisdom. So I have the ability to have just a conversation with somebody as yourself, just face to face like this, and I can pick up on the inflections in their voice, and just their tone in general. And I can clearly see what it is that they need to release energetically.
Yeah.
So I help people how to emotionally and spiritually detax so that they
Wow.
can essentially like remove layers from like their spiritual eyes and see clearly what it is that they were truly created to be.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. I definitely want to talk to you about that as soon as we finish up here. So
Yes, yes.
awesome, Michelle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I certainly want to have you back. Like, I always like do these like the origin story shows. You know what I mean? I'll have a guest on, and we get to hear
Yeah.
your story and such. And then there's so many different topics that we can go into and just do like 20 minutes and like really, you know, do a deep dive into a certain topics about your story, about, you know, like anything that we've really talked about here. So I could definitely foresee that happening at some point in the future.
Yeah, I would love
And
that.
yeah, that'd be great. So thanks again for coming on today. Pleasure
course.
meeting you. And yeah, we'll do it again soon.
I look forward to it, Matt. Thanks so much for having me on. Have a
Thank you.
peaceful evening.
Thank you.